Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I am Moody and I'm a 3D artist with probably closer to 15 years experience than I've been saying. I've been saying 10 but it's closer to 15. In this video we're going to be sculpting Mirko. She's the number 5 hero from My Hero Academia, one of my absolute favourites. She's an absolute gangster, she's so awesome. She's probably one of the only heroes that's taken on 3 or more Nomu and lived to tell the tale, apart from obviously the main heroes like Endeavour and you know other characters like that. But yeah, at the time in the series, taking on 3 Nomus at a time was unheard of, and she's probably one of the only ones that did it and survived. So yeah, she's a fan favourite, one of my favourites. So yeah, with all that being said, let's get into it and start sculpting the number 5 hero. Okay, so as usual, one of the first things we're going to want to do is try and keep as much as we can, try and do as much as we can, with symmetry on before we move off, usually just to get the basics and the foundations in. So I'm going to keep the symmetry on for as long as possible and get some of these like key points laid out. I seal her mouth off here because she's an anime character, so the features are relatively simple. I'll probably come back later and just cut out the shape I want based on the reference you see behind now. Probably just boolean that out later. So again, like I said, we're just going to let this play out for now because all I'm doing is putting in some landmarks, making sure everything works the way it does, or the way I want it to. And just like here, bringing in the eyeball, we're going to work up the eyelids, and then once I'm happy with this, I think we're going to lay out a bunch of heads down the side of the body to make sure that she's around 7.5 heads tall. Heroes usually proportionately are about 7.5 to 8 heads tall. It depends on what you're going for. She's quite a muscular and strong character, so I don't mind being like 7.5 heads tall on her. So yeah, we'll let this play out for now because we're just following the reference that we normally use because it's a good reference. And I'll jump in if anything interesting comes up or anything I need to talk about. So yeah, we'll let this play out for now. So just sculpting and joining, remeshing some of the larger groups like the thighs and the shins and just places like that, so it's easier to work with and I can get a basic sculpt on these before we mirror or do any posing or anything like that. So again, I'll let this play out for now, just wanted to jump in and let you know that. Another good example here of why I do my base meshes the way I do. I was able to, before merging this arm, bring up the bicep a little bit and move the triceps, I think, are at the back there, move those into a better position and just start sort of putting some things in place now that I know I want there. So again, sculpting up the forearms here, making sure they feel like they've got actually bones in them and they've twisted in the way that they should. And yeah, at this point I think I'm just going to start throwing things in like her feet. This is more for a block out than anything else, just to make sure I've got everything I need before I move on and start working on the pose. So this is just some simple mesh and geometry and stuff like that to sort of base block out her feet and just the types of things that because I believe these are support items. So yeah, we're just going to block these out and I'll let this play out for now while we build these up. So before I do, this here is just using the radius tool under the symmetry options there, so make sure it's checked on, and whatever axis you want to rotate on, just crank that number up and you'll have X amount of points to sculpt around the object that you want. So again, we'll just let this play out for now because I'm just blocking out the larger portions of the sculpt and making sure everything feels good before we move on to posing. So just using the tube tool here and going down into the options there, you'll see there's a profile option and you can put some points in there and make any shape you want along the curve. So I use that to make her ears. We're just going to sculpt up some circles here and add some fur type, just like a fur type texture to it as best we can. Again, because this is an anime character, I'm not worried about being super detailed on this. I just want to make sure it's there and it's, you know, a representation of what should be, you know, in her ear there, like a little ball of fluff. So yeah, well, let's keep going, and I'll jump in if anything I need to talk about. So here I try and do more of a realistic rabbits type tail, because my style is kind of semi-realistic, but it doesn't really work out. I try a few things, but I end up just deleting it and going back to a ball, which I'll come and sculpt up a bit more later. So in general, I'm pretty happy with that. Proportionally, the sculpt looks good so far, so we're just going to, I think we're going to start working on the hair at this point. Yeah, so we're going to drag in some tubes, so using the tube tool, sorry, and the profile, and just make it look a little bit more like hair. And we're just going to keep dropping these in the same way we did with our A2 sculpt. So we're just going to put them in roughly into place, get a few in, and then just sort of tweak it a little bit from there. The hair pose doesn't really come in until later, once I've actually posed the body. So initially I was going to do the pose of her with her big metal arm after she's been attacked by the Nomu, but I wanted to go back to a more traditional old school character style that she is, and I chose to have her in the pose that's in the top left of the reference footage there. I wanted to do like a sculpt of her ready to sprint, like just before she goes down the tunnel to fight the Nomu, and some of the poses that she's in for sprinting and just being ready to fight just reminded me of the one in the top left, so we go with that. So I'll let this hair, the hair play out here. It's just adding tubes and, you know, making sure that I've got everything in where I want, and I don't really pose it till later. So yeah, we'll just let this play out for now, and I'll jump in again if anything comes up that I want to talk about. So. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the hair. We're just going to do a couple of last minute things like adding the eyelashes and mirroring them over, and then I think we're going to move on to posing it, so I'll jump back in when we start up the posing. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, we're just going to pose her up as best we can, get her into that sort of like runner's start position as best we can. Obviously it's an anime pose, so it's not quite a runner's start position, but you know, she looks cool. We're going to let this play out. I do toy with a couple of ideas here, just some of the things that I do in terms of like extracting the clothing, but we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, we'll just let this pose keep going, and you can see some of the things that I tried out and gave up on, particularly with her right hand. It's kind of in a claw shape on the reference, and I don't go with that. It just felt a little bit unnatural. We're also going to add a bit of weight and gravity to where it needs to be, so you know, it needs to be said, it's unavoidable to be said, the character has some quite big boobs, and gravity's going to affect those, especially when she's like in the position that she's in. So yeah, we rotate those down. I'll come back to that a little bit later once I've done the base sculpt, the muscle underneath. But again, you know, just filling out areas that have kind of become thinned out or not as sort of chunky as they should be, because I've switched up the pose as much as I have. So we'll let this play out for now, and I'll jump back in once we move on, or once I'm happy with the pose. Okay, so overall I'm happy with the pose. I'm going to start merging some of this portions of the body together. I start with the torso, and I'm going to keep some of this stuff separate for as long as possible. So although I've merged the torso, I'll merge the legs separately, do a bit of sculpting on them, and then merge them with the body. The reasoning behind this, I don't just want to merge everything together and lose the control I have over the individual pieces. So what I'm going to be doing here is just sculpting up the torso, because it's quite distorted, adding the muscles in where I need them, and adding the stretch and any extra flesh where I need it, and just building up the general muscle underneath everything before I add like the boobs, which is a big fleshy part of the front of her, which will be hanging down. So we're going to just keep at the moment working on the muscle and what goes underneath all of that, and then we'll start merging everything else and joining things together. But I'm pretty happy with how this came out, considering it's quite a distorted pose to put a character into. So yeah, I'll jump in again once we move off of this, but we'll just let this play out and see how I choose and where I choose to put some of this muscle definition. Okay, so here we're going to start working on the legs, just moving over some of the mesh out of the way to make it just a bit more believable, where the leg and the side are pressing against each other, and that sort of like the body fat would bunch up a little there. So we're just going to work on a little bit of that before I actually combine the legs and do the sculpting on them, and then we'll merge the legs along with the torso and move up the body from there. So the next part of this is going to be sculpting the legs up. I'm just, like I said, making sure everything's going to work together before I actually merge, because I don't want to lose the control that I have now over the sculpt. So once we do the merge on the legs, you can see here I'm adding the muscle underneath, the muscle around the back of the thigh. That's a tricky muscle to sculpt, especially as it's sort of like stretched out around the glutes and around the back of the body the way it is. Here we're adding the gravity to her boob area. Again, a lot of that fat's going to sort of like pull up at the bottom and make them a little bit more bulbous, if you want, at the lower end of that, and stretched out and just thinned a little bit in the middle where it's kind of stretching the skin down. So once I'm happy with that, we're going to pose the hair, and then we're going to start working our way through the body. So again, at this point, the hair was just getting in the way, so I thought the best thing to do would be pose that up how I need it, get it finished so that it's done and I really don't have to do a lot with it. That moves some of it out of the way, and it just means it's just another thing I don't have to worry about. So I can, when I need to, I can just switch it off and concentrate on sculpting the body and the anatomy and stuff like that. So we'll let this play out for a minute, and then I'll jump in again when anything happens. I'll probably jump back in when we merge the leg to the body and start talking about some of the stuff that I do there. Okay, so here we go, just sorting out the layers there a little bit and making sure I've got all of the correct parts I'm going to need before sculpting up the individual legs. And again, it's just, you know, you can have, I had some reference off screen for this because I just didn't want to fill up the screen and keep swapping out reference in the background, but you know, as long as you've got a decent bit of reference and as long as you've got a rough idea of where the large muscle groups go, I think you're generally going to be okay. But again, merging the left leg here, and you can see on, I think it's this leg in particular, where I feel like I've smoothed it out a little bit too much, so I end up coming in and just carving in the muscle groups again before moving back to smoothing it and moving off of the leg. But we're not really going to see her feet, so I don't bother sculpting that, but I want to get the particularly around the back where the muscles are stretched and those large muscle groups are clearly visible. I wanted to make sure that was right. and then just moving down the leg and making sure the knee looks good and things. But you know, I think this particular knee on her left side was kind of rotated out a little and just twisted into the wrong position, so it took me a couple of goes to make the knee not look like it was a bit fat on the inside, but we got there in the end. So again, here we're just going to be doing the same because it's now merged to the torso. We're going to be making sure that the fat, where she's folded up in the way that she is, we want to make sure that the fat is sort of like bunched up in the correct areas, like here around the top of the thigh and things like that. And yeah, I mean, you just saw it there. There's not really a lot going on here once you know the anatomy and you know roughly what you want it to look like. These sorts of things should become easier. So adding a bit of weight and a bit of fat underneath, because where she's crunched up the way she is, it would sort of like push some fat towards her lower abdomen area. Yeah, so here we are again. We're going to merge the upper arms to the body and start getting this anatomy in. And I think, again, when we've seen this a few times, the only difference about this really is how, like I said, how contorted the pose is. So I think for now we'll let this play out. Like I said, all I'm doing is adding anatomy, working on the skin folds and where the skin meets and the flesh sort of bunches up. So yeah, we'll let this play out for now, and I'll jump in again once we add more to this. I think it'll be adding the boobs to it and making sure that the skin stretches from the right area. So I'll jump back in a little while and just let this play out for now. What's tricky about this particular sculpt is that she's twisted around the top of her body, and it means that her left shoulder is higher and probably more tensed up, and her right shoulder is a little bit more stretched out where she's reaching down and underneath herself. So it's tricky, but again, you sort of pick this stuff up with experience, what the muscles look like when they're tensed and relaxed and stretched out, and you know, this sort of stuff will just become easier the more you study it. So study anatomy and keep practicing. It's probably some of the best advice you'll ever get. So here I'm just working on carving into it so that I can understand on these separate meshes where exactly they're being pressed and where exactly the weight should fall. And I'll do this before I merge it, just to make sure that everything feels comfortable and there's going to be no contact between the two. So yeah, here we go. You can see I'm just adding some extra flesh to the top where the boob would pull it down and it would be stretching away from the pectoral muscle. But again, you know, this is the sort of stuff that you get used to when you understand how gravity and weight affects our bodies the way it does. So I'll leave this to play for now, and I'll jump back in if anything interesting happens. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to adding the clothing at this point. What I do is I just do a bunch of extractions just to make sure that I've got everything I need. I tried to sculpt this in one, wasn't happy with how it was going, so I end up just moving off of that and working on her leotard and her like stockings and shoes and stuff like that. And I come back to the gloves in a little bit. I do end up doing those in separate pieces because it's just easier to control as separate meshes. So yeah, like I said, here we go. It's just going to be masking everything out I want and trying to get as clean of a subtraction. I'm trying to get the mesh out of it, and I want it to be a clean subtraction, or whatever you want to call it. The word's escaping me right now. So here we go. There's this part I was less worried about the two touching, because at the end of the day it's an item of clothing, and it's in fact easier at this point that they're touching. The reason I didn't want them touching before I made the clothes was because it just meant more worrying about where the creases are and having to cut stuff out if they ended up merging together. It just made my life easier. So moving off of that now, I think we're going to start just doing some tweaks on the body and then move on to actually getting these gloves going. So I'll jump back in when that happens. This is just me adding thickening out the arms and making sure that the bones feel like they're twisted in the right way. And here adding the cuffs here now. So I used the radial tool for this a couple of times just to cut out the shape. You'll see it up there, yeah. So the radial tool works on everything. As long as you've got it switched on, it'll cut out. You know, this might be a good way to make a crown or something like that, but I'll let this play out for now because all I'm doing is adding in the basic shapes, and then I think I'll start moving on to sculpting everything once I've got it. That includes the top of the stockings here. So once this is done, I'll jump in again and we'll start sculpting the gloves and the clothing. Oh, here we go. So this is where I boolean out the mouth area and start sort of like getting that sorted out a little bit. Again, I think my reasoning behind this particular choice here is get the face done, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So I get as much of the face done as I can now that I'm particularly now that I'm posed. So I've got a better idea if I'm going to be able to see the way she's smiling, and this is like a cocky smile, like she's about to take someone down and she knows that she's going to kick their butt. So yeah, we'll let this play out for now, adding the teeth, and I think after this is done I'm going to move on to the gloves, I believe, just after these few extra tweaks to the face and stuff like that. But I'll jump back and forward between a lot of this stuff anyway. I'll probably come back to this a bit later and do a few more tweaks before I finish off fully. I don't actually add the eyebrows yet, so I've got to come back and do that too. Here we go, closing the gap between the head and the neck. She does have a sort of like a fluffy collar that covers this up, and again, because one of my aims in the future is to actually 3D print these, I think this just makes my life a bit easier. I'll be able to separate the head, make any cuts in it and what I want and stuff like that. So we add the base shape for that fluffy collar, and I do a bit of sculpting on it later using the radial tool, but at this point I think, yeah, we're going to start working on her leotard and just closing some of those gaps so that we've got some clothing to sculpt on, and then picking some points where the clothes might crease from, like if her arm's touching the inside of her sort of like chest area here, the skin's going to pinch the clothing, and then when the boobs drop down, because she moves into this position, they'll start creasing from the points where the arms gripped it. So like I said before, just think about where these things might stretch from, how she's rotated, and where her body underneath the leotard, where her body might grip the clothing and make it twist. So yeah, I mean, again, this is the sort of stuff that comes with experience. If you're not sure, try and do the pose yourself with some, obviously with some clothes on, and just see where your body grips your clothing and how it twists around your body when you contort yourself. Otherwise, try and find some decent reference to work with. There's a lot out there. But again, I'll jump in again in a minute if anything happens, because at this point we're just sculpting creases into clothing, which we've seen a few times at this point. Just a little bit of tidy up here with her hair, because I noticed some of it was clipping through her collar, and then I think we'll move on to the gloves down here, yeah, and just start doing a bit more sculpting. I'm pretty sure I sculpted that glove and forgot to put the recording back on, so I did miss the sculpt of the left hand. Luckily I realised and managed to record some of the sculpting on this glove, but again, it's just the same as before. Try and think where the material might grip the skin, how the skin's rotated and things like that. It does become easier with a little bit of practice. So reference, practice, best advice you're going to get when it comes to this type of stuff. So there we go, you can see with the some of these things I'm putting on the radial tool in many directions. It looks a little bit like a wasp's nest is attacking the clothing, but it just means that you're sculpting on many different points around the object that you're trying to sculpt. So yeah, again here, just a few more tweaks around the face. I filled her cheek out a little bit there because from certain angles it looked like, I don't know, she had really skinny cheeks, and she's not an ill character or an old character, she's quite young, so she'll have, you know, some flesh around her face and she won't look gaunt or ill in that respect. So I came back and filled out her face a little bit. And then we're just adding creases around the stockings and where they might twist from. Because they're quite tight, these leggings, you know, I only added creases where there's some real bending or contortion, particularly around the ankles, and that would be that. Just going to add in a base of hair underneath, because I realized as well that when I start painting this, you're going to see her head through her hair, so I had a base just to hide some of that, and sculpt in a little piece of it just so that it follows the hairline, because, you know, as much control as you have over the hair tubes, you can still only do so much. And then, you know, adding the eyebrows there, and I think we're going to move off. Oh, we're going to start painting now, which is going to be fun. So I'm adding the base colours to everything just to get a rough idea of what I want it to look like. And then when we move on to the skin, it's going to be the same as before. We're going to add a top layer, turn the opacity down a little, and then start adding all of the different colours underneath just to break the skin up and make it feel a bit more realistic. So reds for the blood areas, like blood vessels around the cheeks and nose, anywhere where you want to add warmth. We're going to put some blue in there to simulate the darker veins that run through our bodies, the ones that carry oxygenated blood around our bodies and stuff like that. It's going to make it look blue around the wrists and between the fingers and stuff, so we'll add that, and then we'll add a bit of yellow as well. And I think what we'll do is we'll try and break that up a little, and then work on the opacities of each individual colour underneath, so it doesn't look like she's got like a beard, for example, or anything like that. So yeah, you can see me adding just areas of warmth here, just to, again, like I said, break up the skin tone and make it feel more realistic. So we'll let this play out for now. And once we've done the last piece of this, which is adding the yellows, we'll move on to adding some wear and tear around her suit and stuff like that. So we'll let this play out for now, and I'll jump back in a little while. Adding some eyebrows. I thought about making them silver. It just didn't really show up very well because I've got the skin to set to subsurface, and it makes it difficult to add you know, anything on top of that without it being affected by the subsurface scattering that I've added to it. So I did darken those up a little. So here we are moving on to the feet, adding the wear and tear around the feet, around the support items that she wears on her feet. Sorry. Again, these are going to get dirty and worn out. She does a lot of running and jumping and you know, kicking ass basically with these on, so they're going to get used up and worn out. Most of this dirt pass that I'll do in a minute will be around any areas that she's going to be using, like touching the floor. So yeah, her feet, the support items on her feet, the dirt probably goes up around to her shins a little bit, and maybe around the back of her knees, and some dirt on her gloves. I don't really go too far with it on this one because I think this pose in particular, in my head, I had this happening at the start of the fight before she fights the Nomu and gets her arm ripped off. So at this point she's still relatively clean. Maybe she's got some dirt on her from running around, but you know, she's not going to have blood up her or any of that sort of stuff yet. So you know, I don't go crazy with the dirt pass here. I keep it to the areas that are in contact with the floor. And yeah, I'll jump back in if anything else happens. Oh, sorry, before I jump off, here's an example of that. The hands are going to be quite dirty. She's running on all fours at some of these points, like a bunny rabbit does. So yeah, once we've finished with this, I'll move off of it and you know, do some final tweaks and then move on to the lighting. Yeah, so I think I overdid it with this one a little bit. I switched the, I turned the other hand back on and I can see the difference. One's like, it's way dirtier than the other, so I fixed that up and then move on. So here I am adding the red to her eyes because I think she's like white rabbits have, they're albino and they've got red eyes. And she's obviously got white hair, white fur, so I'm guessing she's a white bunny rabbit hero or whatever you want to call her. So here we go, adding the red eyes to that, and again it's just a layer with the layer setting set to overlay, I think, and then I turn the opacity down a little. For the chest symbol, I did try and extract it from a lower resolution mesh, and it just doesn't come out properly, so I end up duplicating the leotard, raising that level up super high and then extracting it, but then there I realized I'd made it too small, so we do the same again and just make a larger symbol, which, you know, I end up using this one and just, you know, popping a gold texture on it. Again, I don't really go too crazy with this, just because again she's not really been in the fight yet. Yeah, here I think I'm just adding the last few touches to the suit. I didn't actually put her support items around her waist, her back support. If I'm being honest, I forgot to do it, but I think she still looks cool. You can still tell it's Mirko, so. And here we go, adding the 3-point light setup again, like usual. It's just a good way to show off any model. You'll have a main light pointing at the character at a reasonable sort of intensity. Pop one behind to sort of bring a bit of light into the shadow areas, and then one on the opposite side behind and you crank that up quite high to sort of make her pop off the background. It creates a rim of light around her. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I think if there's any questions you guys want to ask me, you can pop it into the comments and I'll do my best to answer. You can follow me on Instagram now as well, and yeah, I had fun sculpting this one, guys. So with all that being said, I'll leave you guys to it. I hope you enjoyed the sculpt, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Happy sculpting, everybody, and thanks a lot for supporting me so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot.